Vince McMahon taking his wrestling promotion and going national was seen as an evil and dirty thing to do, but the WWF going national also helped bring professional wrestling to people who may never have bothered to watch such a form of entertainment, especially in the mid-80s. WrestleMania 1 and the events surrounding the inaugural WrestleMania opened up a lot of doors for Vince McMahon. But it wasn't just the wrestling that got fans invested in the World Wrestling Federation. The partnership between the WWF and MTV played a big role in introducing new casual fans to the world of pro wrestling. Captain Lou Albano's collaboration with Cyndi Lauper helped to bring in a successful crossover between then popular music and pro wrestling, and it was this crossover, known as the Rock and Wrestling Connection, that seriously helped the WWF appear more appealing to the masses. Through this collaboration, the WWF benefited from having mainstream celebrities appear on shows, including musicians and actors, and MTV was able to secure a few WWF shows that would air on their channel: The Brawl to End It All and The War to Settle the Score, two shows that aired before WrestleMania, and two shows that, in a way, served as build-ups towards the big extravaganza in Madison Square Garden, at least on a more wide scale. The Brawl and The War done great numbers for MTV, and someone who paid attention to those numbers was Dick Ebersol, the executive producer of Saturday Night Live. Reruns of Saturday Night Live would air on a late-night TV slot during the 80s, and Ebersol struck a deal with Vince McMahon that would see the WWF produce a new show to replace the SNL repeats. This would not be a weekly show, but rather the show would have an infrequent schedule, meaning this new presentation, known as Saturday Night's Main Event, would feel more like a series of special events. Airing on a commercial network like NBC, Saturday Night's Main Event was incredibly important to the growth of the World Wrestling Federation, while the creation of Monday Night Raw years later shaped how we consume wrestling to this very day. The WWF's NBC wrestling show would be much more important in terms of showing the naysayers what pro wrestling was all about, due to the show being available in so many homes through a prominent commercial network. Things like this simply can't happen in modern times due to how we choose on-demand streaming services over TV channels, but back in 1985, this NBC time slot that the WWF acquired for around 5 times a year was quite simply a golden ticket into people's living rooms. WWF Saturday Night's Main Event would be the first wrestling show to appear on network television since the 50s. Weekly WWF shows at the time were mostly filled with predictable squash matches where the main eventers would destroy jobbers week in and week out. Wanting to put out the best show possible, Saturday Night's Main Event would completely change the formula by giving fans high caliber matches for free, with the odd exception of course. This was quite rare at the time. If fans wanted to see the likes of Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant in anything meaningful, they'd usually have to pay for the privilege. So in order to gain as much exposure as possible, Vince McMahon decided to put out the best talent he had at the time. The show's production values were also upgraded to quite an unbelievable level when you consider how WrestleMania 1 looked in comparison to the first Saturday Night's Main Event. WrestleMania 1 took place on March 1st, 1985, and Saturday Night's Main Event 1 took place on May 10th, 1985, just over 2 months later. The production quality is like night and day. And yes, of course, Madison Square Garden would have been more difficult to light up, and the WWF had a set way of producing television inside the garden, but the NBC show looks like such a huge upgrade that you'd think they were years apart. All in all, there's an effort here to make the show more appealing than typical wrestling shows at the time. This was for mass consumption after all, and this maybe could have been something that turned off hardcore fans and fans that were faithful to the NWA. But Saturday Night's Main Event wasn't targeting die-hard wrestling fans, it was a show for the general public. McMahon was hoping to gain more viewers, Dick Ebersol wanted a number similar to the MTV shows, and both objectives were achieved. Saturday Night's Main Event was a massive rating success, with later episodes breaking NBC records for that particular late night time slot. NBC and the WWF would also go on to produce a Friday night show thanks to the success of SNME, known simply as The Main Event. In a February 1988 episode of The Main Event featuring Andre the Giant vs Hulk Hogan, still holds the distinction of being the highest rated television show in American professional wrestling history, drawing a ridiculous 33 million viewers and a 15.2 television rating. That kinda puts this whole AEW versus WWE ratings thing into perspective, doesn't it? Okay, so let's take a look at the first episode of Saturday night's Main Event. For this video, we're going to look at a restored version of the show that adds video and music that was removed from the WWE Network upload, so you may see the video quality change from time to time. I consider this WrestleMania 1's true fallout show, and I think if you look at the show as what happened after WrestleMania 1, you're going to have much more fun with it. The show starts off with Cyndi Lauper giving Wendy Richter some advice in regards to her match against the Fabulous Moolah later on tonight. Wendy is going to use the bad principle. Moolah will get beaten, annihilated, and destroyed. We then go to Hulk Hogan, who announces that Mr. T will be in his corner tonight. The Hulkster's going to take on Bob Orton, and the WWF Championship will be on the line also.
That's right, Hulk, baby. And if that fool, Roddy Piper, step his nose in the ring, he gonna answer to me. I'll pity that fool.
The intro video then plays, and the original song used here was Obsession by Animotion, the SNME theme we more commonly know, and the theme that has been added to the early episodes on the network made its debut in 1988. We then get introduced to the commentary team, Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura, and we're told that we're going to see two championship matches tonight, the Hogan and Richter matches respectively. And also, we've got a 6-man tag, a Junkyard dog match, and we're invited to Cyndi Lauper's Mother's Day party. The Iron Sheik comes out first for the 6-man tag. Sheik, Nikolai Volkov and George Steele are going to take on the US Express and Ricky Steamboat. A brief interview with the babyfaces takes place before their entrances, and Captain Lou tells Freddie Blassie he better not stick his nose in this match. Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA plays in the Nassau Coliseum as Wyndham Rotundo and Steamboat make their way to the ring, and here we go, the first match on the first ever Saturday night's Main Event. We get an awkward 3-way high five before the match begins with Sheik and Wyndham. The crowd pops when Barry goes on offense, and the crowd keeps cheering as Barry keeps the pressure on. Quick tags from the babyfaces lead to Steamboat coming in and landing a top rope attack. Steamboat and Rotundo perform a double back elbow, and the Sheik's punishment continues with a body slam and an elbow drop from Mike Rotundo. George Steele is already sweating buckets in the corner and he hasn't done anything yet. Sheik finds himself in a reverse headlock, Steamboat comes back into the match, and Sheik is then able to go on offense with an abdominal stretch, but the Dragon counters with a hip toss. The heels come in to save Sheik, and what can you say really? The hip tosses look bad here, and you can see why Sheik was taking all the bumps early on. The babyfaces clear the ring as the show takes a commercial break. We come back and Sheik still hasn't tagged out. Steamboat hits a power slam and he follows up with a top rope dropkick and a top rope crossbody. Volkov finally comes into the match, but just like his tag team partner, he isn't very successful inside the ropes. Wyndham and Steamboat perform multiple double team moves on their opponent, and the match comes to an end when George Steele gets tagged in. The Animal shares a few right hands with Barry Windham, but when George tries to tag out, Sheik and Volkov leave him high and dry. This allows Windham to pin George and the crowd goes nuts. After the bout, George tears open a turnbuckle pad before getting attacked by his own tag team partners. George clears the ring and his old manager, Captain Lou, embraces the Animal. Mean Gene wants to know why Sheik and Volkov shunned their tag team partner, and Freddie Blassie says George is crazy and he wouldn't tag when he was supposed to. George walks past and he nails the Iron Sheik before we move on to our next segment. Piper's Pit is going to take place in the middle of the ring, and Piper's guest is his WrestleMania tag team partner, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. Piper isn't too impressed with Orndorff getting pinned in the WrestleMania main event, so the Hot Rod wants to have a chat with Mr. Wonderful and sort some things out. The first thing Paul does is tell Bob Orton to stand in a corner and not behind him. Remember, it was Orton who accidentally hit Orndorff with his cast at Mania, which led to Hulk Hogan pinning Mr. Wonderful. Piper tells Paul to sit down, Orndorff says ladies first, and Piper says he feels sorry for Mr. Wonderful because the Hot Rod doesn't know how it feels like to be a loser. Piper has to calm Orndorff down before the two start talking again. Piper says it was Paul's shoulders that got pinned to the mat at WrestleMania, and Paul wants to know where Roddy was when their team lost the match. Roddy says he was too busy fighting while Orndorff was busy losing. Piper says Paul lost his guts, and Paul says Piper's been drinking too much of his own bathwater. Piper says Paul's a piece of garbage, he embarrassed Piper, he embarrassed Orton, and he embarrassed his whole family. This makes Paul square up to Piper. Roddy says he's going to leave, but then the Hot Rod tries to get in a cheap shot. Orndorff does well fighting off both Piper and Orton, but Orton's cast comes into play and Mr. Wonderful gets taken out. Mr. T then shows up to save Orndorff. The crowd goes crazy for Mr. T, but he doesn't get physical here. Mean Gene Okerlund interviews WWF champion Hulk Hogan, and the Hulkster says guys like Piper and Orton need to get kicked out of the World Wrestling Federation. Hogan then says he's happy Mother's Day is coming up soon because he's dedicating his match tonight to his own mother. And as for Paul Orndorff, Hulk says he's happy that Mr. Wonderful has saw the light and he's distancing himself from Piper and Orton. Hulk's match with Orton is up next. Orton and Piper are still in the ring, and the crowd completely lose their minds when Eye of the Tiger plays and the Hulkster makes his entrance. Hulk gets in the ring, we go to another commercial break, and when we come back, Mr. T is here along with the Hulkster. The bell rings and Orton tries to blindside Hulk with his arm cast, but Hogan sees it coming and Orton takes a beating. The two briefly end up on the outside of the ring, and when they get back inside, Orton takes a back body drop before getting rocked with 3 body slams in a row. After consulting with Roddy Piper on the outside, Bob Orton gets back in the ring. He does a little damage to the Hulkster, but nowhere near enough. Hulk has no problems taking control once again, and Orton's injured arm becomes the focus of Hogan's offense. Mr. T watches on as Hulk destroys Orton, and Jesse Ventura says this is the most vicious he's ever seen Hulk inside the ring. Hulk then takes the match to the outside to deliver more punishment. When the match gets back inside the ropes, Orton performs a jumping knee attack that finally puts Hogan down to the mat. Piper likes what he sees as Orton lays in the right hands and Hogan takes an atomic drop. Orton goes on to attack Hogan with knee drops, right hands. Hogan gets dropped to the mat face first, but Orton can't put the Hulkster away. Hogan keeps kicking out. You know what to expect here really. Eventually Hogan begins hulking up and Orton takes a beating. Hogan drops an elbow on his opponent and he enjoys hitting Orton with a few punches in the corner, but Orton nails an inverted atomic drop before going for his finish, the superplex. I think a fan tried to jump the guardrail here as security rush over to the corner and the crowd shifts their attention to what's happening outside the ring. But back inside the ropes, Hogan gets out of the superplex position, the Hulkster then lands the leg drop. It should be all over, but Piper punches Hogan from the outside. The referee calls for the bell as the Hot Rod jumps into the ring. Mr. T tries to take care of Piper, but Orton wakes up and Mr. T gets laid out in the corner. It looks like the heels are going to get the better of the babyfaces here, but then Mr. Wonderful shows up, leading to Piper and Orton getting out of harm's way. This next bit has been completely cut from the WWE Network release. I assumed this was cut so the WWE didn't have to redub Eye of the Tiger again.
And Mr. T!
The next part of Saturday night's main event 1 is also completely cut from the WWE Network, but it's a bit more obvious why. It's a full music video for Cyndi Lauper's new song, The Goonies Are Good Enough, a song that was part of the Goonies soundtrack. Lauper and Captain Lou cut a promo before the video airs. They talk about Richter beating Moolah tonight and how Captain Lou was once an enemy of Lauper's, but now he's a friend. And then the video airs. If you haven't seen this one, go check it out. It features loads of WWF superstars, and it even features the cast of the Goonies. Roddy Piper shows up afterwards and he says the music video was great until Cyndi Lauper started singing. Piper and Lauper then have a big argument where Roddy says Steven Spielberg asked him personally to appear in the music video. And yeah, good stuff. It's a real shame this couldn't be included in the network release. Fabulous Moolah versus Richter next. We all know how unsavoury Moolah was, for a lack of a better term, but if we're going to check out this whole show, we have to watch the whole thing. Moolah says she got some papers from the higher-ups at the World Wrestling Federation. If Lauper comes anywhere near the ring while Moolah is inside the ropes, then Moolah can have Lauper barred from ringside. Moolah gets in the ring and then we get an interview with Cyndi and Wendy. Lauper says she's a manager tonight, so she has every right to be in Wendy's corner. But it turns out that Moolah's paperwork actually holds up and Cyndi ends up getting sent away from the ring. Lauper has to go back up the entranceway and watch the match on a monitor. Gonna be honest here, this match is pretty brutal, but you don't have high expectations going in anyway. You've got Moolah in the driver's seat for the first portion of the match. Wendy makes a comeback. We think Moolah has it in the bag, but a surprise pin ends the contest and Lauper doesn't even get involved in the match. The crowd enjoys Richter and Lauper celebrating at the end and all that, but you can skip this one and not miss out on much. The promo and music video beforehand were way better. Junkyard Dog has given his mum a special Mother's Day present. He's brought her all the way to New York so she could see her son wrestle. JYD says his mom has never been in New York before, so he thought this would be the perfect opportunity to bring her to the Big Apple. And Bertha says she's proud of her son and she hopes he can come home soon to spend some time with the family. JYD is taking on Pete Doherty here. No, not this Pete Doherty. But this Pete Doherty, as Howard Finkel calls him. I think Doherty is the more accepted American pronunciation of the name, but either's fine. Pete is also known as the Duke of Dorchester, so let's stick with that. I know I said SNME featured main eventers and upper card guys, but there was the odd exception to the rule. Another one bites the dust, plays in the arena, and out comes JYD. The narrow entranceway has been a problem with fans reaching out to touch their favourite wrestlers, and it looks like the Junkyard Dog wants to fight some guy who grabs his mother. The fight starts on the apron where JYD headbutts the Duke. A forearm knocks Pete loopy it seems, and Dog keeps his early momentum with a clothesline. The Duke goes to the outside and his reaction to Dog grabbing his hair is absolutely fantastic. Pete goes to attack Bertha, but this, of course, results in JYD dishing out more punishment. The Duke tries to attack Dog back inside the ring, but it has absolutely no effect. Pete gets floored with a right hand, and then we see some of those signature JYD headbutts. Pete, the absolute madman, gets on the top ropes and he starts celebrating like he just won the match, and this results in Dog tossing his opponent to the other side of the ring. JYD then holds Pete up while delivering more headbutts. The Duke takes an atomic drop, and Bertha has a smile on her face as her son absolutely destroys this poor chop. JYD ends it by performing a power slam. It feels like a mercy ending with poor Pete never really having a chance. And Mama Bertha gets down with the Dog inside the ropes before we move on to our next segment. It's another example here of how popular JYD truly was. The final segment of Saturday night's main event 1 features Cyndi Lauper and her Mother's Day party. Superstars are lined up, some with their mothers, some without, and Mean Gene makes his way down the line while conducting brief interviews. Bertha again says she's proud of JYD. Iron Sheik calls Okerlund Gene mean while saying he's sick of Cyndi Lauper and he wants to slap Captain Lou. Volkov says his mother lives in Russia and she couldn't make the party. Freddie Blassie says that this lady right here is his mother. Mean Gene tries to give her a little kiss, but Blassie is having none of that. Captain Lou reads out a little Mother's Day poem. The Hulkster brought his mom to the show, say hello to Ruth Hogan, responsible for the true birth of Hulkamania. And Cyndi Lauper's mother, Katrine, is also here, and she says it's great that mothers all around the world are getting recognised for the jobs they have done. Hulk Hogan's ears perked up when he heard the word job. The fabulous Moolah interrupts the party. She makes fun of Cindy's mom, and Moolah was supposed to get a face full of cake, but Mean Gene definitely takes the bump here. He gets absolutely covered. To make up for it, Lauper whacks Moolah on the head with another cake, and when Moolah tries to retaliate, she falls on her ass. Remember guys, it was the mid-80s and the WWF were going for entertainment outside of a wrestling ring. Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura wrap up the show by talking about the results, the credits roll, and the first Saturday night's main event is in the bag. The first SNME proved to be a big success, benefiting both the WWF and NBC by attracting new viewers and bringing in a big rating, a very impressive 8.8. The second Saturday night's main event done a 10.4, and right up until 1990, the show never dipped below 8.7. As mentioned, the success of the show led to the primetime main event show on Friday nights, where more records were smashed by the World Wrestling Federation. Quite simply, American TV audiences couldn't get enough WWF at the time, and it was this type of distribution that seriously helped the WWF become the giant it is today. Is the first Saturday night's main event show good? It's okay. I wouldn't say it was spectacular and something that you should go out of your way to watch, but if you have an interest in the WWF's growth on television at the time, then it's definitely interesting. The record-setting main event show featuring Hogan vs Andre is an event that I'd like to cover in the future, and there's a few other Saturday night main event shows I'd like to look at again too, including the 2006 reboot. So if you haven't done so yet, you could help me out by hitting the subscribe button. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.